I'm sure like everybody will be really familiar with the phrase energy flows where my intention goes. So working with that soul energy, because you're in a place of love, you feel supported and held and like you're not on your own, right? You're kind of essentially home. So, and in that place, this is like the biggie. In that place, you're in a place of trust, right? So ego doesn't need to step forward and take over, take control, because you're in that place of trust. You just lean into love and go with the flow.
Yeah. Hello, my loves, and welcome back to Create Your Life. I am your host, Simone Leah. So I just wanted to let you guys know that today's interview is actually an interview that I recorded about a year ago when I ran an online event called the Soul-Led Entrepreneurs Summit. It was a really, really, really wonderful event. I had some beautiful, amazing speakers talking about things like connecting with your intuition and how you can use that in your business. How to do Facebook advertising, how to do marketing as a soul-led entrepreneur, all of these cool things to do with business, entrepreneurship, and actually also spirituality and connecting within. And so these interviews were so wonderful that I really wanted to be able to share them with you now. So if when you're watching this, you see or hear the word soul-led entrepreneurs, this is still the Create Your Life show, but these interviews were just too good for me to keep to myself any longer. So I really, really, really hope you guys enjoy this interview, and I can't wait to connect with you again soon. Hello and welcome back to Soul-Led Entrepreneurs. I'm your host, Simone Leah, and today I had the absolute pleasure of interviewing Jen Thomas from Revitalize Coaching. So Jen lived the corporate life and worked in the corporate until she just couldn't ignore the knock anymore. So she's someone who's now a TEDx speaker, she's an intuitive coach, and she works with people every day one-on-one and in her coaching programs, and she was an absolute pleasure and delight to talk to. Her TEDx talk was actually around the concept of bringing emotion back into business, and so we really kind of deep dived into that today and talked about how just having that awareness of knowing where you're coming from when you're making your decisions and what emotions are actually fueling those decisions, and having that awareness of what's running you and how that can have an effect on which way your decisions are going in your business and which way your business is actually going. Hey guys, and welcome back. I'm here today with Jen Thomas from Revitalize Coaching, and we're here to talk about putting emotion back into business. Thank you so much for being here today, Jen. How are you?
Oh, thanks. It's really, really cool to be here. I'm really well, thank you. Although, yeah, I'd far rather be in Australian sunshine being in the autumnal UK right now.
Can totally relate, but the UK is an amazing place to be when it's sunny.
It's sunny, yeah.
But thank you so much for being here. I do want to jump into a few very exciting topics, specifically your TED Talk and putting emotion back into business. But if we could
Mhm.
just start with the question of what does being soul aligned and a soul aligned entrepreneur mean to you?
Yeah, it's a great question. Having journeyed through, that very structured, quite patriarchal system for, the first 20 odd years of my career in marketing in that corporate world, to then transition into retraining as a coach and an NLP practitioner, and then a spiritual and intuitive coach and mentor. So it was quite that journey and shift to go from a position of being completely commercially focused, so always focusing on the numbers, the logic, the rationale based decision making, to shift through to noticing how I was feeling about my work and my decisions and choices, and then the strategies in my business. And it became so much more important and valuable to me to be working from an emotional or heart energy or soul aligned or soul led perspective, and recognizing that actually all the commercial stuff, once you're soul aligned, just naturally flows almost behind you, like it, so it's leading with the heart, and then just trusting and knowing that all of that kind of balance of, yeah, the commercial stuff comes in afterwards.
Oh, that's so amazing. And it sounds like such a journey to have gone from being in that more corporate and then going into that space of like just that shift. So how was that? Was it yeah, what was that like?
I mean, amazing because I'm out the other side now, but truly, really painful. It was horrible at the time. So I'm sure, do you know, particularly in the last few years, I'm sure this will resonate with your listeners and viewers a lot. I burnt out. I was, doing the 12-hour days, 6-day weeks, sometimes 7-day weeks, and, sprinting faster and faster and faster just to try and keep up or stand still. And by doing so, the further and further I got away from my emotions, the faster we go, the further we get away from how we're feeling. And actually, our feelings and our emotions are our most powerful guidance system. So if we don't know how we're feeling, we're just kind of taking a crash course forward, right? So in 2015, in that corporate world that I'd been in for so long, I don't know, my heart and my soul finally provided an opportunity for me to break down and break free. And I burnt out, had a big kind of burnout and, mental health episode, which took about 3 to 4 months for me to really recover from, because I'd pushed myself so hard and so fast. And it was all based on fear energy, which I was clueless about at the time.
Yeah.
So, yeah, and I think we've seen a lot more of this through the pandemic situation where people have been living in this fear energy. We've been really highlighted about money and the finances and people. It's weighed heavily for a lot of people I know, and it's fueled that fear energy. And I know there have been some, a lot of burnouts and breakdowns, but I really want to reassure anyone watching or listening to this that it's happening for you, and it's okay. It's okay. It's paving the way to something truly awesome for you.
Yeah. Yeah, well, because that actually does bring in and ties into what we want to talk about, which is bringing emotion into business. So, like, obviously, people are feeling all of these lower density emotions, like the fear and the anxiety and the stress and the burnout. Um, how can they move through that to start to be able to go and start on that new journey?
Yeah, and it's a tough one, right? Really tough, because when you're caught up in that energy and that way of living and that way of life, you're so you're so caught up. It's hard to, it's such a British phrase, but it's so hard to see the wood for the trees. Um, so, but truly, the best and easiest way to do it is to slow down. And I know how hard it is. It took for me to have a breakdown to slow down. But actually, that first really important step that I took, I made a promise to myself on that. I remember that, within the first few days or weeks of that breakdown, made a promise to myself to walk outside in nature every day. If it was just for 10 minutes, great, but ideally longer. And I did work up to doing longer because it enabled me to slow down, and it enabled me to start to begin to reconnect with how I was feeling. And it wasn't pretty. And I didn't like myself very much, let alone love myself. But that healing power of nature and slowing down, it sounds so simple, but it's so powerful. So that would be probably my biggest guidance for people to help themselves.
Yeah. And if they are already an entrepreneur and in business, how can bringing the emotion back into that just help in general? Like, even if they
Yeah,
haven't felt that big crash, just in general, how can bringing emotion back in help things?
good question, Simone. Because it's really truly how I shifted and tripled my business in the pandemic year as well. It was a big thing for me, really big thing for me to essentially come out of my spiritual closet and, tell people that I not only did I work with emotions, but I worked with the universe and energy and my spirit guides and angels and, all of that stuff, which can be quite out there for a lot of people, especially when you come from a very masculine energy based corporate role. And part of that transitional journey and transformational journey was really coming back to who I truly was. And the only way for me, and I believe anybody, to do that is to come back to how you're feeling and to question that and be curious about that. So when you're in business, particularly when you're, perhaps on your own as a solopreneur, you're doing everything, right? You're the marketing director, you're the finance director, you're the IT director, you're as well as doing the amazing work that you do, right? So you're all of those things. It can be busy and it can feel pressured. So, like, I'm sure a lot of business mentors out there, I do wholly recommend setting your alarm and getting up early, not to check your emails, not to dive into your social media, but to spend time with you. So the first thing I do, so my alarm goes off at 6, and the first thing I do is to drop into meditation. Like, and I get out of bed to do it, otherwise I'm asleep, right? So it's to get into meditation, clear and create stillness, because that is where I get the clarity of my emotions. And that's where I can get the real, genuine certainty and clarity on any decisions I'm making in my business. Do I go this way? Do I go this way? Is this the right strategy? Right? Because if it's fear-based, which we often are when we're not in stillness, it can create problems further down the line. So
Okay.
essentially, meditate.
I love that. I meditate every day. I love meditation. So totally agree with that. So say someone is in business and they did meditate in the morning, but they've had a bit of a busy day and they do have to make an important decision. How can identifying their emotions, yeah, how can they just do that? Because as you're saying, like, if they aren't necessarily aware of why they're making a decision and what emotion is underlying that, they could potentially be coming from a fear place. So how could
Mhm.
someone who's busy just drop into that in the middle of the day and get a gauge of where they're at?
Yeah, and it's a really good question, and I'm sure your viewers may not love the answer that I'm going to provide, but there isn't a quick fix here. Getting to reconnect with your emotions, depending on your starting point, obviously, but reconnecting with those emotions, it's going to be difficult to just drop straight in and work from an energy of love, because first you've got to clear all the crap, all the BS stories, all the kind of pre-programming, the institutionalized thinking, the limiting beliefs. You've got to work on that. It's got to surface. You've got to release it and transform it into something more resourceful and positive for you. Because if you're holding on to that still, you're holding on to fear energy, and you're still working in that fear energy. And it takes time. So you have to allow yourself time. So any big, huge decisions, they're much easier when you've done the work already. But in its simplest form, I teach my clients in Soulpreneurs Club, we talk about things that feel heavy or light rather than fear or love, because sometimes the emotion can be too intense. So it's, does it feel heavy, does it feel light? Or perhaps for those that are more visual, how does it look? Does it look messy, does it look clear?
That's amazing. I think that's really, really awesome. Yeah, that's super cool. So that's something that if someone was making a big decision at their business or place of work, they can just kind of go, all right, well, does this decision look light or feel light? And then if it
Mm-hmm.
does, then it's more of a yes.
Right, yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah, I love it. It's such a great tool, but yeah, but be warned.
Yeah,
If you
yeah.
haven't done any of the work, it's going to be hard to
Yeah.
kind of make that connection. But yeah, it's yeah. I think as human beings, we love to overcomplicate stuff. And actually working in, you know, with the universe, it's super simple. Love is a very simple energy to work with.
Yeah. Well, like another thing I do definitely want to go deeper into love, but how would, if someone was in their business and they weren't so far on the journey, but they've made a little bit of a start, so they know there's work to do, how would they identify the difference between a story
Hmm.
and not a story?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So in my world, I would probably refer to that as ego versus soul. So our egos, our personalities, man, we love to be in control. It's absolutely a human nature aspect, but it is, and this is where the power of meditation and finding that stillness comes into its own, because you can start to discern between what is ego, fear-based energy, and what is soul, higher self, heart energy, loving. Ego, you can recognize ego with signs like, I can save the world by doing this. Like it's big, huge, and overwhelming. If I do this, it's going to make me millions. Right? It's a very ego-centric based story. And it is based in survival mode. So that there's always a positive intention there, by the way. It's not for anybody to feel bad about that at all about to that point actually of then when you know it's soul energy, there's no judgment there, it's purely observation, and it feels more joyful, um excitement, but without the nerves. So soul energy is very much about how can I make a difference, and you will be, you know, be shown or feeling those answers, and that for me is the difference between ego and soul.
Oh, that's beautiful. Thank you. Yeah. Would you also say that, like, I think we did touch on this a little bit, that when it's coming from the soul, there isn't any of that, um, like anxieties or stresses in terms of I'm running late, or I haven't got enough time for this, or is this the right move? Whereas when it's coming from soul, would you say that it's more of a just a natural, you're just leaning in that direction?
Yeah, exactly that. I'm sure like everybody will be really familiar with the phrase energy flows where my intention goes. So working with that soul energy, because you're in a place of love, you feel supported and held and like you're not on your own, right? You're kind of essentially home. So, and in that place, this is like the biggie. In that place, you're in a place of trust, right? So ego doesn't need to step forward and take over, take control, because you're in that place of trust. You just lean into love and go with the flow.
Yeah. Okay, so
Simple.
we've talked about love a few times, which I personally love. But for the audience, um, what are we talking about when we say we're leaning into love, and like that's the emotion that we want to get to, is that place of love? For the people who aren't necessarily so familiar, what are we actually talking about when we say that?
Yeah, I think, look, it can have so many different descriptions and perspectives. And I think the important thing for everybody is to recognize what it means to them and how it resonates for them, because I don't think there's a one size fits all kind of answer or response here. So for me, love is source energy, the universe, creator. I'm not a religious person in terms of a label or a practice. So it's not necessarily God for me, but the essence of that, it is for me. So it could be God, it could be goddess, it could be the universe. For some people, on the very scientific end of the scale, it could be the quantum energy field. Yeah, but it is essentially what it means to you. So for me, as a more of a clairvoyant, intuitive, I see in my mind's eye. So for me, love is a golden color.
Yeah, that's beautiful. So yeah, so when we're saying we're connecting into love, what we're really saying is we're connecting into that something that is greater and bigger than ourselves.
Yeah, yeah, that's such a great way to put it. Yeah,
And
awesome.
then yeah, and then taking the guidance from there, so to speak.
Hmm.
Like when we're
Hmm.
connecting
Hmm.
in with that love, how does that help us to make those right decisions?
Yeah, well, and this is what I love about it, is because when you've made that connection, because when you're in fear energy, you're separate. But when you're in love energy, you're connected, whole, part of the one, part of your home. Then you know without any question that you are loved. So whatever that soul guidance is you're receiving from higher self, source energy, the universe, whatever it is you're receiving, and it feels amazing, you know it is for your best interest and your highest good. And it is to help you and work for you, support you, because it's coming from a place that loves you deeply and unconditionally. So
Oh, I love that. I really, really do. So for the people who are like, I'm not getting to love, like that's a leap. Um and I think
yeah,
like a lot of us, if not all of us, have
I've been
been
there.
there.
I recognize it. Yeah, I remember it.
Exactly. Can we talk a little bit about how we're not necessarily going to go from the lower density fear straight to love? What's kind of in the middle of that process in there in terms of the
Yeah.
range of emotion and the work that gets done?
Loads of crying, Simone. No, not necessarily.
I
Not
love
necessarily.
it.
It wasn't for me. I'm not a big crier, so it wasn't particularly for me. A lot of that, but yeah, look, I think it is worth saying for some people, it is. They come straight out of heavy and straight into love.
Perfect.
So, but I would also say that's the rarity rather than the norm. So, for example, like a near-death experience, right, may catapult you from that fear energy into love. So, and I clearly don't recommend trying to create that. Or perhaps it's something that they've seen that is just that light bulb of, huh, and they remember what they've always known. And but for the likes of you and I, where yeah, it wasn't ka-ching, that switch straight away. It is, so I recommend to my clients just a 5-step process. And that first step I mentioned already, spending time outside,
Yeah.
slow down, notice what's around you. Nature is our greatest teacher.
Yeah.
Notice there's a rhythm, try and get into flow with it. Secondly, I recommend yoga as a practice. I'm a big fan of Yoga with Adrienne on YouTube if you
Oh,
can't get
yeah.
to a local class, because it helps you to connect with your physical body as well as your mind and your heart body, right? And it's really important. It helps us on that path to alignment. And number 3, journal. Write till you can't write anymore. Just keep every day, just write a little bit, even if it starts off with, I don't know what to write today. Just start and go, because it will help those emotions surface. Step 4, meditate. We've talked about it. Do that every day. Step 5, repeat step 1, 2, 3, 4 as often as you can, and every day, ideally. That will help you all the way back home, back to love.
Okay, I literally love that. So for the people, actually, I do all of those. So I really, really, really do. I do
Great.
all of them every day. So I love it. Um, so for the people who are like, oh my goodness, that sounds like a lot. Do they have to spend like an hour doing that in the morning? Can they break it up over the day and say do meditation in the morning, yoga after work, journaling before bed? Or like, is there a process that needs to happen, or they can just do any of them as it comes up? And is there a certain amount of time that they should spend in each?
Yeah, they're really, really important questions, Simone, I think, because I'm of the view there's no prescriptive right or wrong way. It's whichever way works for you. And I think one of the ways to really highlight that is about meditation. I think so many of us think it is sitting cross-legged in this position, eyes closed, in a place of stillness. And for a lot of people, that works really well. And for me, it works really well. But you can also be in a meditative state whilst you're out walking in nature, looking at the clouds, or whilst you're doing the washing up, or you're doing some kind of almost mindless task like cleaning the house or playing Candy Crush on your phone, right? Because essentially it's like if you've got a cat and you've got a cat toy, like essentially your ego is the cat, right? So you're dangling a little toy over here to entertain it with something else, whilst then your soul energy can step forward. So I think it is finding a process or a regular practice that works for you, and you will know if it's working for you because you will feel it.
Yeah.
Right. But not to give yourself a hard time about not doing something a certain way.
Yeah. So if someone was to say, all right, I'm going to start this thing, would you potentially recommend just trying out 5 minutes a day of each for, say, 2 weeks, and then seeing how they go and assessing it? Or like, how would you say they even approach it to get started?
Yeah, I think that, that 5-minute option is so awesome because it's so achievable. Like, wow, I mean, if you can't find 5 minutes in your day, there's a lot deeper stuff going on, right? Hopefully everybody can find 5 minutes, even if you're stood in the shower, right? You can have 5 minutes. You can meditate in the shower, right? Journaling less easy. But yeah, start with 5 minutes and start to gradually and gently, compassionately for yourself, increase it until it feels comfortable. And just, notice I would say after 3 or 4 weeks, you would notice a marked difference.
And just with and I suppose it definitely does apply to journaling as well, but with meditation in general, what would you say to the people who are like, I've tried that and it was boring and it doesn't work?
Yeah, great. Yeah. And do you know what? It is a practice. Sometimes I've been doing it for years now, and I'm sure you feel the same sometimes, Simone. Like, I'll sit down to do my meditation practice and it's not happening. I can have a battle with myself, have a full-on internal fight, and like try and sometimes it doesn't work. Sometimes you're just not in the right energy. There's something else going on. Do you know what? Just give yourself a break. Know that that's okay. It's called being human, and that you can come back to it another time, but just keep loving yourself to do it regularly, and just keep trying, and it'll switch on.
Yeah. And I suppose, as the saying goes, if you don't have 5 minutes to meditate, then you need 10.
100%. Yeah, like an hour.
Yeah, exactly. I totally was thinking of it. I was like, oh. Yeah, definitely, definitely. So say someone is doing those practices and they are like really starting to move through some emotions and that sort of thing, how can having all of that emotion help them in their business? Because now we're going from having these lower density emotions to having these higher density emotions, but they're not out the other side yet. So how can these little moments of lower density emotions help them in their business?
So, awesome question. I love your questions, Simone. So, yeah, thank you. So, I think it's about awareness and being consciously aware, because once we know what's going on, we can start to make informed choices. So, one of my favorite quotes by Carl Jung actually is, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate.
Yeah.
Right, so when these heavier density energies start to surface, there'll be something behind it, an awareness to a belief that you once held, an awareness to an emotional responsive pattern that you have to something else that triggers you. To be aware of it means that you have control, and it means that you have choice, and it means that you can make, yeah, just really loving, awesome choices for you.
Yeah.
Yeah, and just notice how very subtly your energy and your emotions are starting to shift and change.
Yeah. So say I've had a busy day and I've been flat out in meetings and I'm about to do something and I realize I'm operating from a fear mode and I'm like, "Oh gosh, I don't have time to find the belief." Like, if I did have time to find the belief, can I also come back to that later and just go, "Okay, there's the belief. I'm going to work on that later." Or is it
Mhm.
one of those things that when you're feeling something come up, you need to look at it and address it right then?
Yeah, do you know, I'm of the view that sometimes you can't deal with stuff right there in the moment for whatever reason. Funny enough, just on the weekend, a few days ago, I was at a yoga class doing a practice in a class, and a deep emotion came up, and it was a grief emotion. And yeah, of course, I was like, well, I can't deal with this right now. In this space, like I can't, be blowing snot bubbles in the, in
Yeah.
the middle of the yoga studio. And for me, it's quite a private thing too. So it is just kind of becoming aware. So I did know, on some level, I knew it was related to grief. I didn't know specifically what or who. um and so a few days later, I recognized, okay, I have space to revisit this now. So actually, I went for a walk in nature and I
Oh,
connected. Yeah, because it's an open space, and for me, whilst I'm moving and I've got a what feels like a uncomfortable or painful emotion to deal with, whilst I'm moving, it gives the emotion movement too. So it's much easier to release it and process it. Yeah, and it was all, my dad passed 17 years ago, and there was still some unresolved grief there. So I had a good cry in the forest, and yeah, had a chat with my dad, and all was good.
oh, that sounds actually really lovely and healing time, to be honest.
Oh yeah, it was very special, and I know it's lifted me up another level. Oh, and
Yeah.
it feels good, feels really good.
So exciting. And I do actually want to touch a little bit on the fact that when someone says, "All right, I've got this really heavy emotion," and sometimes they're like, "I can't deal with that right now." As you said, it took a couple of days. But in their head, it's because they're making it like, "Oh, I've got to deal with grief. I'm going to be crying for 3 hours and it's going to be really hard and painful." And all of these other
Mm,
stories
mm.
come up. But I'd love to hear your thoughts on when you actually go into that, it actually clears and lifts a lot quicker and easier than you actually spend all that time worrying about. I feel.
Yeah,
How do you feel?
yeah, I 100% agree. And for my own experience, as with, I think, every single person on the planet, in some way, shape, or form, we've all been through some level of trauma. And this isn't about comparing to anybody else's trauma. It is whatever you have experienced is relevant and relative to you. And, you know, it's an individual experience. So often those traumas happen when we're younger, perhaps in a childhood or early adulthood. Of course, they can happen later on in life. And of course, we've also got the limiting beliefs and the stories that we're in the main forming before we turn 7. So often we've been holding this stuff for a long time.
Yeah.
And for me, there were a couple of incidences in my childhood that were incredibly painful. And I was, hand on heart, I was terrified to go and revisit them. But I knew I had to, and there was a lot of resistance. It did take me a long time to find the courage to do it. And you know what? I mean, they were horrible. It was horrible. I'm kind of laughing about it, to your point, because it really wasn't that bad to go and revisit it. And my perspective is because we're going into revisiting something that was painful at the same age, with the same emotional responses and the same belief systems of who we were then, rather than who we are now. So I learned to go into, I've created a virtual healing sanctuary, which is what I teach my clients to create for themselves and do this healing work. So I went into my healing sanctuary as I am, or I did this a few years ago, like at the age an adult then, to go and work in and do that inner child work. And yeah, with that adult perspective and that adult kind of safety and protective space, it was just something that I was able to observe and see new perspectives, compassion, and enable forgiveness and freedom. Yeah, I think it is just going in as your adult self, not the child self.
Yeah. And as the observer too, I think helps as well. And just observing what was going on as that child, you know,
Yeah.
and not judging it or the way any responses happened or anything in the situation, just literally going in and observing it, and you just get that different perspective that tends to lift things.
Yeah, completely. I think it's back to that awareness perspective, isn't it? You've made it conscious, you're aware of it, and it just, yeah, gives you new understanding, which again will get you closer and closer to that feeling of love always.
So, say for example, you've got someone who's in business and they're finding this block that they just can't hit over a certain money amount threshold. And everything
Mm,
they do, they just can't get over it. And then they're starting to get more stressed and they're starting to get more stressed. And
mm,
they start to do the work and they identify the belief underneath that. How do they go from identifying that belief back to being the original time that that belief actually formed? And
mm.
are they related? Could the money thing have been about money as that child, or can they be completely separate?
Actually, I think they can be both, not necessarily, or either is probably the better answer. So of course we're taught money stories when we're growing up. So we'll be witnessing what's happening at home around money, the conversations, the little throwaway comments that we take on board. So yes, you may well kind of do the work where you are today and start uncovering, oh, well, that was mum's belief, that's not what I believe, or that was dad's belief, that's not what I believe. So yeah, journaling through it, I think, is really powerful, because then what you start to do is tell your own story and recognize this is your own journey. You're not journeying anybody else's story, and most definitely not your parents' journey. They have their own journey and their own path to walk. Then I think at the other end of the scale, if it is something separate, it's usually to do with self-worth and whether you believe you are allowed to receive. And there is a block a permission block. I don't deserve to receive this. And, that's a really powerful aspect to learn and become aware of, because then you can do that deeper work and find out, okay, what do I need to start telling myself? What's the truth here about what an amazing, wonderful, beautiful person I truly am, evidenced in my work and the way that I interact with others and love others and give to others, right? Or the evidence is always there for us to see.
I literally love that. And before this interview, we actually did touch on that one of the most important things is that people do learn how to love themselves. So I would love to share a little bit about that with the audiences. How can they identify if they do have problems with their self-worth and they perhaps don't love themselves the way that you and I might think that way through? So how would someone even identify that in the first place, that they're not there?
Yeah, do you know what? I think everybody knows on some level. They know whether they don't truly love themselves, value themselves, and it will be showing up in all sorts of different ways. I love, well, I don't love it, but I notice the most common thread and conversation that I hear with one-to-one clients is things like, why does this keep happening to me? Why is the same relationship coming into my life over and over and over again? Why is history repeating itself? Like, it doesn't matter what I do, the same thing is happening, right? That's unresolved self-worth and love issues. It may also show up in physical terms. So you may be like, and it can be seemingly so unrelated. Like, I've got a pain in my knee that just won't go away. Or I'm always getting a cold. I've constantly got this cold, right? Your physical body, your unconscious is trying to tell you through your physical body. Yeah, and it will show up in terms of not being able to sleep properly, having perhaps waking up in the night in a sweat, or finding yourself incredibly short-tempered, or stressed and angry and upset at a seemingly no apparent reason. So it can show up in loads of different ways.
Yeah. So how can someone start to bridge the gap between unworthy and love? Is that a journey that can happen instantly, or is that a journey again that's going to take time and removal of layers and beliefs?
Yeah, I mean, look, I would be super compassionate in wherever you are on your journey with yourself. And, there isn't a prescriptive time. For some people, they'll get there sooner than others. But it's remembering that it's your journey and your path, and how you get there is your story and your life, right? So yeah, so don't be comparing yourself to anybody else, firstly, and where they're at on their journey, and always have love, kindness, and compassion for yourself first and foremost. But yeah, I mean, I don't think it's an overnight thing.
Yeah. So do you think that someone can start to tip the scales in their favor by themselves, or do you think that they do need a little bit of help in identifying those beliefs, or do you think a combination of both?
Yeah, I think it's a combination of both. Look, I think as a coach, I know my clients really benefit from me helping them see the perspectives and raise awareness. But also, as a coach, the most powerful thing is empowering somebody to find their own way and feel awesome about it, right? Rather than telling them what to do. So, yeah, so working with a coach, a therapist, whoever you resonate with, it could be a sound healer, it could be Reiki healing, it could be theta healing, it could be a coach, it could be a spiritual mentor. Whatever works for you and however you connect with that person, it's the right way forward for you, but also being very mindful that you have to do the work yourself. Nobody can do it for you, but it is awesome to have that support along the way.
I am about to put you on the spot here. I'm so sorry in
Okay.
advance. Are you able to share any of the business transformations that you've seen happen when people do really connect in with themselves and obviously source, but connecting in with and loving themselves, and then also connecting in with whatever they believe is the higher, which I think we both refer to as source? What sort of business transformations have you seen when people can tap in there?
Yeah, awesome question, because it's one of the first thing, I guess, one of the first questions that my members of my Soulpreneurs Club ask me to, does this really work? Is it really going to transform my business? And the answer is yes, and yes. So I'm a really good example. My business has been running for nearly 6 years now. And when I first started as a coach and NLP practitioner, I was helping people to recover from burnout, manage anxiety, and leave the corporate space to set up on their own. So I did that for 3 years. And it was okay, but it was a bit sporadic. It was a bit, feast or famine, I suppose. And also I was very aware of a voice that kept calling. Reaching out, and that voice kept saying, speak your truth. And I didn't get it. It was like, what do you mean speak my truth? Like I'm an open book. What do you mean? And it was about me teaching what I know about that journey from fear to love, and that journey of being disconnected to connected, the journey of reconnecting with the universe and source. So when I did do that, and I came out of my spiritual closet and I launched my Soulpreneurs Club, which was downloaded completely from Spirit as guidance, by the way, for something for me to do in early 2019, quote unquote, to prepare for something big next year.
Right.
Yeah. And it was to go take my business online and call it Soulpreneurs Club and teach business owners how to work with their emotions, working with the universe in whichever way that aspect happens for them. And my business tripled in a year. In less than a year, business tripled, because I was in that love energy, I was in the flow, and it was like, I'm doing genuinely, truly what I love.
Yeah.
And I'm showing up truly as me. So in terms of my clients, just a few days ago, one of my clients, she came to me as a therapist, and she was very spiritual. She was working very closely with angelic energy and, dare I say, unicorn energy, and she was very much in her closet herself. And through doing the modules in the program and weekly calls, group calls with her peers as well, she launched and sold out as soon as she launched it, her new workshop, working with energy, chakras, angelic energy, just last weekend, which was a huge success. I think she made more money in that weekend than she had in the prior month, perhaps. And another one, one of my favorite stories around one of my first soulpreneur clients. She came into their business with this, she'd done the work, like, this is my ideal client, this is what I help her with, this is how I help her. And she was all, talking all about this client. And whenever I listened to her, I could see her heart energy was wholly aligned to it. There was something missing. And she received guidance and it was a very strong vision for her to shift to a new client set, which was wholly different. So over here, it was working one-to-one with women who were in grief. Over here, to work with schools and kids to work with stress and anxiety around exams. So like wholly different. And as she felt into it, leaned into it, she started to become more and more excited about it and go, actually, I'm really passionate about this. I really care about our kids and their future. And within just a couple of days, the universe started aligning to that energy. She was, somebody approached her and offered her a position to, it was to help with the lateral flow testing around the pandemic in the schools. So all she was doing was going in to help with lateral flow testing. So seemingly completely unrelated. Then started getting to know and having conversations with the head teacher there about their kids and the stresses and their struggles. And he ended up asking her, oh, as a coach, is that something that you might be able to help with? Longer story, much shorter. She's now launched her own program called Future Me, and she goes into schools and teaches kids or coaches kids to work with exam stress, overcome it, anxiety, and work their future. That's phenomenal.
That's amazing. Like, that's such a big shift. And and the fact that she's just so much more passionate about what she's doing and working with the kids. And like, I think that's just such an amazing calling as well. You know,
I loved it. Just every week she joined the group calls just saying, you're not going to believe what's happened this week.
Yeah.
Like, hit me with it. I love it.
Oh, that's amazing. And I feel like also that there's probably people at home wanting to know with you as well. When you tripled your income, did you also triple your workload? Or were you
Thankfully, no. No, because I'd shifted it from individual to group.
Amazing.
And I'd shifted it all online. So, and obviously I do have a bit of support now, and I have a very, very small team behind me, but doing that additional, work that is not my strength, shall we say.
No, that's great though. It's amazing to know that, upping the income doesn't mean upping the time and the workload and the stress. Well, maybe a little bit of the stress, but like, I think that's amazing to know that it doesn't go up in the same way.
And it's interesting. I think it's different, and because you're doing what you love, even if I am doing more hours, it feels less because it feels easy. And I think that's such a important awareness for us all. Work and earning big money does not have to be hard. Like, I think we've convinced ourselves that we need to have nearly flogged ourselves within an inch of our lives to be worthy of earning, a lot of money. Actually, the universe says you're here to be happy. That's it. You're here to be happy. Do what makes you happy.
Yeah. And
it might feel easy.
Yeah. And it's like you said earlier that the work almost does itself because it's so joyful and aligned.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's almost like it did it yesterday. It's not even like you're doing it today. It just kind of flows and falls into place so easily.
Right. Exactly that. And, you're just in this high vibrational love energy, loving what you do. You have more energy because you're aligned and loving what you do. And if you're doing your meditation and your yoga and your time in nature, you're always feeling more restored, revitalized, you might say.
I love that. Yes. I do love that.
Yeah.
So I do feel like I know what the answer to this question is going to be, but how do you connect within both inside and outside of work and like business?
Yeah, it's the same. But like for me, when you're running your own business, you are your business, right? My personal life, my business life, I am the same person. you know, these, like my relationships, my family, my finances, my health and well-being, that they're all connected, right? It's all like a wheel, right? Wheel of life. So where you shift stuff in your personal life, it will have a positive impact on your business world too, right? Because you are the energy, you are the pivotal point there. So whatever you're feeling, it will be reflected in every area of your life.
Yeah. I literally love the Wheel of Life. Everybody Google it. I wish we had more time to dive into the Wheel of Life. I love it. I love it.
It's such a
Um,
cool tool. Yeah.
yeah, maybe we should just have a quick, like, just if anybody hasn't seen it, basically the premise with the Wheel of Life is that you can break it into as many sections as you want, but generally around the 8 to 10 mark. And you can kind of have each section. One might be community, one might be work, one might be spirituality, one might be family. And for me, the way I understand the Wheel of Life is that you want all of those wheels to be roughly the same level, right? So if they're all at, say, level 8, or they're all at, say, level 4, that's fine because they're all pretty even. It's still pretty round. But if one of those wheels is a 2 and then the one next to it is an 8, you're not going to be balanced in that wheel because it's not balanced. You've got a 2 and then you've got an 8 and maybe there's a 5. And, so the Wheel of Life is great because with what you're saying there is, as you clear one thing, it's growing the whole wheel, as
Mhm.
opposed to you're just working on one little thing. And so that's turned into an 8 and the next one's only a 2, So I don't know, is that how you would sort of think of the Wheel of Life as well?
Yeah, I love that balance aspect to it. Because I think when most of us sit down to first do that exercise, we recognize, oh,
Yeah.
I'm not in balance at all. So I love that perspective about it. But I think it is also knowing that, like, accept that, allow it,
Yeah.
because if it was all in balance, you wouldn't be drawn to sit down and do the exercise in the first place, right? So allow yourself that, allow your 2s and your 3s and your 4s. It's okay. It's just where you're at right now. I think one of my favorite aspects of that wheel of life is when you're going into what is my 10 out of 10 aspect on each section. Because, and I always say to clients when they're doing it, do you know what? This is rainbows and unicorns. Go for your life. This is, forget about whether it's possible or not. What would you desire? What would be just, oh, can't believe this is real, because that's the real fun bit, right? And we
Yes.
can really start to see who we truly are in that.
Yeah. And it's great. And by using the Wheel of Life, as we're saying, you can see those little things that do need to be tweaked and refined
Yeah.
to help grow
Yeah.
everything as the whole, which is so
Hmm.
beautiful. But yes, so a little bit of a digress, but thank you for going there with me because I do love the Wheel of Life.
Of course.
Would you happen to have 3 top tips for people who are wanting to, yeah, really understand and know how to use emotion in business moving forward?
Yeah, I mean, I think we've covered them generally speaking throughout this session. But yeah, look, the first one is to slow down. We are going at 300 miles an hour and it's not sustainable. So, but it takes every individual. Don't wait for somebody else to lead the way, show the way. Be the change you want to see. Be the leader in your own life. So slow down. And yeah, secondly, I would, spend time in nature. I've talked about it a lot, but the power and the healing and the wisdom in nature, if we just opened our eyes to it, it's all there. It's all there to teach us all that we need to know. Tip number 3, I would, I found this really helpful on my journey, actually. And if people are watching this, they're already doing it to some extent, but flood your mind with positive information. Don't watch the news. It's fear-based, sensationalist BS, if is my honest opinion. To create drama, and it's based on fear energy. So flood yourself with TED Talks, podcasts, inspiring documentaries, inspiring based on real life movies. Flood your world with positivity.
Yeah. They're amazing. They're great tips. Thank you so much. I love those. And if there
You're
was one
welcome.
resource that you think that would most likely help the audience, what resource do you think that would be?
Well, an umbrella resource that is like my go-to is Hay House Publishing. Like I'm probably Louise Hay's, biggest fan and recommend all of their stuff. So there's a number of authors in there that I think are awesome. So Anita Morjani, Dying to Be Me. Who else have I got up here? Actually, he's not a Hay House published author, but Hal Elrod, The Miracle Morning. He has a lot of wisdom in that book. Brené Brown. Oh, Brené Brown, like she's my hero, I think, Braving the Wilderness. And I am the hugest fan. You may not be aware of him. He's Scottish. I mean, he is global, but Kyle Gray, he's who I did my angel guidance certification training with. He is a phenomenal teacher and mentor and opens you up to the world of angel energy and beings. And I love the way that he teaches because it's simple, accessible, straightforward, and yeah, awesome. So those would be my go-to resources for sure.
They are amazing resources. Thank you so much. And if
Very
the audience
welcome.
wants to connect with you, where can they find you?
So I'm on Facebook as Revitalized Coaching. I'm on Instagram at Revitalized Coaching, and that's with an S, by the way, not a Z. And you can find me on LinkedIn under Jen Thomas.
Amazing. Thank you so much. It has been such a pleasure to have you on today. I'm sure that everyone's got so much value out of that. And I've literally loved diving into this topic because it's one I could talk about forever. So thank you, thank you, thank you so much for being here. It's been so wonderful.
Thank you so much for inviting me. I've loved it. And yeah, it was a pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Jen.